about whatever Rob's going to talk about. I think you've got SDRplay and used gear stuff. So everyone, go to his thing. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this, click like. If you want to see more of this, click subscribe, hit the bell, and do all of the great things to keep this channel running. And thank you so much for 2,000 subscribers. I am over the moon, like shaking with glee and joy, and this has been such a unique experience, and I hope everyone else here in the YouTube bunch has a similar bump in numbers, if you will. So thanks a lot, everyone. 73, and I'll see you next time on N0SSC.
Okay, hey, thanks, Sterling, and congrats on 2,000. That was a great presentation. Great presentation by everybody here so far today, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the day and everybody else's presentations. So today I'm going to be talking to Jon from SDRplay, who should be joining us shortly. And then after we wrap up with Jon, I'm going to talk a little bit about buying used gear and just kind of the Hamfest or swap meet aspect of a Hamfest, since a lot of us go to Hamfests for that reason. So I guess that's going to be my lineup. Do you want to hand off the presenter to me there, Sterling?
Yes, I sure do. Make host. You are the host.
Okay, perfect.
And are you streaming live right now?
I'm live on my channel now. We're just kind of getting ramped up. I see Jon's in and waiting. So again, thanks. And everybody out there that's watching, be sure to check all the YouTubers' channels. Go to the YouTubersHamfest.com. The whole lineup is there, and see what they've got to offer for the day. And again, thanks, Sterling, for the nice handoff here.
Yeah, good. I'm glad that was more or less seamless. So I'll say 73. I'm stopping the stream here, and I'll get out of here.
Okay, 7-3, Sterling. We'll catch you later.
Good luck.
Okay. So I guess before I get started here, like you guys can probably see on the screen, Jon's waiting to come in. I'll just tell you a little bit about my channel. My name is Rob, N1NUG, and I'm fortunate enough here to be representing the One Land stations out here on the YouTubers bunch. I hail from Connecticut. So without further ado, let's get Jon in here and see what he can tell us about SDRplay. I've been using their equipment here for a number of years. I really enjoy it, especially I think it's a good entry point for new hams that want to get started but don't want to spend a lot of money on expensive gear. And it gets them exposed to radio and SDRs and all that kind of a thing. So without further ado, let's bring Jon in. So just wait a second. There he comes.
Hey.
How you doing, Jon? Thanks for taking the time out of your day to support the YouTubers Hamfest and the ham radio community in general. I know you have a big support for that within your company. I know most of you are hams, if not all of you.
Quite a few, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So, well, thank you very much for inviting me onto the show. I know it's been a huge day, a huge effort amongst all the YouTubers, so really pleased to be joining you.
Well, again, thanks for stopping by, Jon. A lot of us use the SDRplay radios, so I thought it would be good to have you on and talk about it, maybe answer some questions if anybody has questions, and maybe tell us a little bit about the company. Give us some behind-the-scenes information, things that you wouldn't necessarily normally throw out there on like a tech type webinar.
Well, that's right. This is very much a very friendly sort of ham radio oriented team, and so it's an interesting story. Like most stories in life, it's a combination of luck and hard work, I think. But just in terms of the luck side of things, I mean, my interest in radio is as a teenager. Before the internet, it was great fun to build electronic circuits, and I had the good fortune when I was about 13 years old to join a radio club.
Jon, I'm going to stop you for a minute. I don't know if you want to share your video or not, but we're just seeing your avatar right now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right. There we are. Hi. Can you see me now?
I can see you now, John.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, and for the benefit of everyone over there, I'm based here in the UK, just about 1 hour drive north of London, near a town of Bedford, which is also where I grew up. And when I was like 13 years old, I had the good fortune to get to the Bedford Radio Club, and a group of really encouraging people inspired me. I mean, there's some kind of techie history in Bedford. It was 100 years before I was there as a kind of young schoolboy, that Marconi himself lived literally on the side road to where the Bedford Radio Club used to meet.
Oh, interesting.
100 years, there's a blue plaque on the wall, and he was there from the age of 2 years old till 6 years old. His mother used to drag him around Europe, and I think that sort of inspired him. But there was definitely some kind of good vibes for me all those years ago to really enjoy playing with radio. And I got my call sign 49 years ago, G4ABQ. And so, as is the case of so many of the people who've kind of rejoined the hobby, I think after doing an electronics degree, I got into semiconductors and electronics and forgot all about ham radio. Years and years went by, and then it kind of, the magic is still there. The idea that you can communicate around the globe, point to point, without any other infrastructure is just magical. And the whole technology still amazes me. So that's my own background. And so I worked in Texas Instruments. I used to spend a lot of time over in Dallas, Texas, and Houston. And then in about 15 years ago, I joined CSR, Cambridge Silicon Radio, the guys who got Bluetooth chips going. And then I thought I'd take a bit of an easier life. And I was doing some sort of part-time work, consultancy, and I met this amazing group of people who I'd kind of come across before from Mirics. And Mirics had really explored the idea of software-defined radio, as it could well have ended up in every cell phone and smartphone is an SDR. But there was interest going back some 10 years that all these smartphones should also be able to pick up broadcast signals, because back then there wasn't the bandwidth, there wasn't the Wi-Fi, there wasn't the 3G, 4G prolific as it is now. And so Mirics had been funded to develop the ultimate SDR technology to go alongside the processor that you have for free in your cell phone. And back then it was going to be, for global broadcast, you needed everything from long wave in the UK. And in some countries, about the only broadcast stuff you can pick up is L-band, up at 1.7 gigs. So that's actually the history behind why our radios go from long wave to 2 gigahertz. They just rounded it up a bit. And that same technology, which obviously didn't proliferate into phones, because the cell phone guys want to know what you're consuming. They don't want want you listening in and tuning into stuff, off grid, so to speak. But what a great thing! And those chips, as they became, some radio amateurs heard about them and started to, look at what could be done. So I met these guys. I mean, just amazing people, and we came together just over 6 years ago to create the very first RSP1. And our hardware guy, Ian, one of the brains behind the whole architecture, has really focused on what it would take to still have a tuner-based SDR with that wide coverage, with as bigger bandwidth as possible, and minimize all those kind of alias problems that the dongles have, and putting in all those extra notch filters and technology to make a pretty rugged, robust design, which was the RSP1. Now, there was a few things that weren't perfect, weren't as good as they could have been. and we learned from that and came out with the other products. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long, but I must mention some of the other characters that joined us along the way. We're very, very grateful to the community out there, particularly early days of the Facebook group, the independent Facebook group. Paul Jones was really key, and still, even though he works for ELAD, a complementary SDR company, still is a very good friend to us. And then there was Mike Ladd, who 3 years ago actually joined the company and is based in Florida, provides a lot of technical support, does his ham guides and videos, and very, very helpful to be over there in the US time zone.
Now, Mike has a YouTube channel as well, where he has technical and everything like that. What's the name of his channel, John?
So his channel is called SDRplay Ham Guides. If you just go into the YouTube search and type in ham guides, you'll find it. And the idea behind that is that this is a little less formal than the YouTube channel we have for SDRplay is growing very big. This is a place where you can kind of post comments. You'll get responses quickly. You could even suggest new topics for videos, and Mike will respond. So that we're a fairly still a very small company, because we subcontract the manufacturing of the hardware. It's all done in the UK. These are made up in Hartlepool in the north of England by TT Electronics, and they build up the boards, do the assembly test. We provide the test program and everything, and then we subcontract the fulfillment. And we have a super partner in the US with Ham Radio Outlet as our channel partner to the community. So it's a very sort of friendly community, and there's always more we can do. And I was going to maybe just take a few minutes just to canter through what we've got at the moment, and kind of a refresher, and maybe talk a bit about
please
software.
Please tell us about the current hardware lineup and what you're offering for software, and maybe a little bit of your roadmap if you're able to share some of that. Sure.
Yeah. If probably the best thing is if questions pop up, feel free to just chip in, and I'm happy to stop and start.
Okay.
As appropriate to make it interactive. I'm now going to attempt to share. Whoops. Okay. Can you see the kind of slide?
Yep. That looks good. I can see your slides.
Okay, good. So I'm going to just go through this. This is really for anyone who's just stumbled across this and not really sure about SDR yet. And there are a lot of people who still like the old physical hardware. In fact, I had meant to show you. I can show you just in the corner.
Oh yeah, you got to show everybody this.
I meant to show you this. This is my transmitter. Let me just go back to the other scene here.
So yeah, John uses his SDRplay for his receiver, but this is what he transmits on.
This is what I use for transmit.
The best of both worlds.
And this is literally 50 years old. And it's actually kind of was an oldish design then. So the technology is probably 60 years old. I mean, it's good old tubes, as you could call it, valves, as we say.
Yeah.
And this is a 10-watt top band and 80 CWAM transmitter, classic design. And boy, I was able to work pretty much, certainly stateside from the UK. It was a great thrill on top band, as you can imagine. Right, back to the story. So, yeah, anyway, for people who are completely unsure of what's possible here, with one of these RSPs connected to a computer and an antenna, you then have a general coverage receiver capable of going from 1 kilohertz up to 2 gigahertz. And the one thing, if you haven't ever tried an SDR, the thing that's so different from a traditional radio is you can visualize the signals on a big HDMI monitor, really good monitor. You can see those signals, and it's like having another sense almost for a radio amateur.
And this is one of the reasons why I like to point new hams in this direction, because it helps them to visualize the signals that they're hearing, and they kind of understand, bandwidth and sidebands and carriers and things when you can see it on the screen. Like I said, I think that's one of the benefits of your receivers in particular, because of the low entry point.
And yeah, you can see you can see an upper sideband signal when it should be lower sideband, and vice versa, just from the envelope of the modulated signal. So it's and I can even tell, that's a French station versus an English station just by the for SSB, just by your brain gets to know the intonation of, we speak in a different way. And you can actually see the difference. Incredible. Yeah. So anyway, this is where I just got to get the slide to change. Sorry about this.
Oh, no worries.
This is the usual thing.
Yeah, it's hard to manage all this stuff and try and maintain composure. No worries.
Why is that changed? That's on that. I must have clicked. Okay. Right, we're off to the races, as they say. Okay. So I'm going to just very quickly go through our value product that we've tried to keep as low cost as possible with the rugged plastic box. Single antenna is the RSP1A, and the 1A really gives you the base functionality of all the RSPs.
Can't get it to show.
You always get coverage over the full 2 gigahertz, and you get to see up to 10 megahertz of spectrum with it. And the other thing that kind of glues it all together is our Windows-based SDR Uno software. And I really want to just talk about that. We'll come on to the other 2 more advanced radios in a minute. But even with the RSP1A, you do unlock the full functionality with SDR Uno. And I don't want to go on and on about SDR software capabilities particularly, but hang on. There's there's a couple of things that SDR Uno does particularly well, and I think possibly this is the most popular features, is what we call band framing. Because with a wideband SDR, you've got the capability to tune just about anywhere and see anything from a few tens of kilohertz up to 10 megahertz of the spectrum. We've got these band framing buttons where you literally press on a button. You choose, say, the ham lower bands, which brings up these bands, and you click on, say, the 20 meter band, and your radio is set to automatically fill the screen and span the exact, spectrum, which is the 20 meter band. And this saves a lot of time, and you can quickly jump from one band to another. And if you're maybe a lapsed radio ham and you just want to see some ham bands to start with, this is a great way to be up and running. The other thing is our integrated scanner, where you have a start frequency, a stop frequency. You can set the step frequency. You can select how long to hold the signal if it finds one. And most importantly, this line here is the threshold, which you set to the point where it just brings up the real signals, and not just, if you have it too low, you'll get lots of noise. You can then populate a memory panel with this, and the scanner can also alternatively take your memory panel full of favorite frequencies and just scan around them, just like a purposeful dedicated scanner. So that's another specific integrated feature that we have. The roadmap is it's probably a little bit of an eye chart, but I'll just verbally just say we've released version 1.4 last weekend, and this is released as it's like better than a beta. It's actually it's a release candidate, so it's almost there, but we do know that there will be some bugs that we're just ironing out. So we haven't taken away 1.33, which was the previous version. The key thing that this new version has is a plug-in capability and the ability to record and select just the audio file rather than the whole IQ for recording, which takes up a lot of disk space. And over the coming months, we'll be adding additional capabilities to the recording system to make it more of a powerful scheduler, so you can have it recording on squelch and a lot of the features that we've been asked to include. 1.42, the big thing about that is having SDR Uno working finally with the TCP server. So there is a TCP server that is cross-platform today. So you can have your remote RSP connected to a Mac or a Linux box. And the only problem today is the only communication we've got is with other third-party software. And we will be adding that in 1.42. This will be a very, very powerful interaction, both for IQ access or more. If you've got a limited bandwidth, you'll be able to just use it remotely just on the signals you're looking at. DX clusters coming at 1.43, and over the next few months, because we've released these plugins, then we're hoping that we'll have more seamless interaction with a bunch of third-party applications that will be added. The big one, which is many months still, is version 2, but work is underway, and this is when we actually migrate to a completely new platform, and it will work on Windows, Mac, and Linux x86. So that's the big one that we do get asked a lot about, and we are committed to that.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to that one myself, and I see some people in the comments are saying the same thing. They're looking forward to the Linux support. So that's going to be a big one.
That really is. Yeah. There's a totally separate Windows-based spectrum analyzer, which, good news, a couple of days ago, I think it was on Monday of last week, we released the software from Steve Andrew, who is this Australian guy who's just worked on this solidly for about 3 years now, and amazing guy. And this really gives you a lab instrument. And we've got the version out now which supports the RSPdx. That was something we got a bit of flack about. People say, when will it come? When will it come? I think we said weeks, and it turned into a few months. But it's there now, so all the RSPs can enjoy having a alternative life as a spectrum analyzer. And this gives you all the functionality you'd expect in terms of sample and hold, and it's a very fast scan. It stitches together, repeated slots to sweep and create this visual.
Interesting. Yeah, that's one thing I need to play with. I saw Josh do that a month or two ago on his channel, and it looks very interesting. I got to give that a try one of these days.
Yeah, I mean, like for EMC detection and homing in on RFI, or it's a good sort of first level tool for that. Of course, it's calibrated, so you know the exact signal strength, and then you can go and use Uno for data logging, and you can actually set up the recording function to build a CSV file that you can then use in Excel. Raspberry Pi, and today we released the new SDRplay image. So this is an SD card image that you download from the website, and you burn your SD card, and it has the operating system, the Raspberry operating system, everything you need to be up and running with cubic SDR running on a Raspberry Pi. So that now supports the DX as well. Again, you can go to the the website to find out more. I mentioned plugins and the release. This is a slightly earlier one. There's one or two more plugins actually going to be there in 1.4. For example, there's a DAB recorder, which is more for the Europeans. And we've got third-party developers promising additional stuff that will tie into this. And this saves you having to use the virtual audio cable, which is the standard way to connect the output from the RSP, each of these receivers that you set up. That's the way you pass it across to CW Skimmer or any FT8 software that you might be running and other applications. And over time, we'll get that tighter integration with the applications, which just makes the whole experience a lot more easy and straightforward. So, couple of just a quick rundown on the more advanced RSPs. The DX is quite a lot of people out there bought the 2 and the 2 Pro, which very popular. And like them, it has the 3 antenna ports. The only difference with this one is that we've included a BNC for the 3rd port instead of the high Z port. It was a bit of a kind of tough decision, but there's just so much interest in things like mag loops, and everything comes with BNC connectors that we went for that. The key thing about this also is the additional filtering and signal handling capability below 2 megahertz using this proprietary HDR high dynamic range mode, which just gives you the edge below 2 megahertz where the conditions are particularly demanding. Comes in a nice solid metal box that's very, very chunky. Right, and then of course there's the dual tuner Duo. So if you think the 1A and the DX both give you the ability to tune anywhere from down at very low frequency up to 2 gigahertz, and at any point you can see up to 10 megahertz. With the Duo, you can do that as well, but you can also have independently 2 separate slots of 2 megahertz visibility. So you could be on down here, you could be on top band here, and you could be up on 77s here. I'll show a couple more examples of that. This one does have the high impedance port, which is really nice if you're kind of portable or you can get near the outside world. But in this ever, interfering, people having a lot of trouble with electrical interference, then that's we found it was of less interest as time goes on. But basically, you've got 2 tuners, whether it's however you feed the signal in, tuner 1 over here, tuner 2 here. And the powerful thing here is you get simultaneous real-time antenna comparisons. You can have two antennas and you can set it up and see them in real time. So the effects of fading are much, much less. And there's diversity reception using SDR Uno. We've also got a lot of other capabilities planned. We're looking at direction finding longer term, and that's going to be very exciting.
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Here's just a visual of 2 independent frequencies. That's 40 meters, and the aircraft band up here.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who like to stray away from the ham bands and listen to other stuff, air traffic control can be a lot of fun. And you can have one of your tuners listening to the 120 megahertz AM air traffic control voice signals, and the other one could be looking up at the telemetry and aircraft flight information from Dump 1090 and ADSB.
Okay, I've got one question here, John, and I think maybe spell check got in there and screwed things up, but somebody's asking if there's maybe a memory button, or it says on here memorized, but I think he meant to say memory or something.
Yes, so there's so both for the scanner it can be used for the scanner. We have a set of user defined, well, it's memory panel basically. So you can either, if you can get them from your friends off the internet, some people even sell great lists of frequencies, and you can import them, or you can create your own over time if you find there's particular frequencies that you want. So I assume we're talking about station memory or memorizing specific frequencies. So that is possible.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Like I said, it looked like spell check maybe screwed it up a bit. Maybe he'll clarify, but I think that's what he was asking.
Yeah. Okay. This is shows the additional graphic you get when you have an RSPduo and you're in diversity mode. You get this rosette appear, and depending on where you drag, you can either use it in automatic mode, and this little line will dance around and find the optimum combination of relative amplitude, and that's represented by the length of the line. So if the line just hits that center circle, that's unity between the two tuners of the two inputs to the device. If it extends to the outer circle, that's a ratio of 2 to 1. One signal is twice the other. And then where it is in the circle, the orientation is a representation of the relative phase of one signal to the other. In automatic mode, it'll actually find an optimum way of getting the maximum ratio combination, which is basically means that you've got the best of both signals. And this is great against sort of fading conditions, and the more diverse your two antennas in terms of orientation or polarity, the more dramatic the improvements. Now down at HF, this gets quite hairy because the spacings you need to do that are quite big, but up at VHF and UHF, it's more predictable. There's also, which is becoming increasingly useful for people who've got really bad EMC problems, and that is to use it in manual mode. And if you've got one antenna, which is your best antenna with a pretty good signal, but it's suffering from electrical noise, and then you've got a maybe lesser antenna that's also got that electrical noise, you can use that second signal to subtract the noise from the good signal by manually adjusting this. And it's typically close to the opposite direction from the MRC mode. And that there's one or two good YouTube demos that show how powerful that can be. And it's particularly popular in Japan, I think, where they, a lot of amateurs have lack of space.
Yeah, close quarters.
Yeah.
I've got a couple questions in here, John, if I can interrupt before we lose them.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries at all. There's a lot to cover here. Somebody is asking if you're planning to give us an API so that we can send DX spots to the waterfall.
Yes, indeed. In fact, that was the, if I just flick back, that's basically what is meant by the DX cluster plugin.
Awesome.
For 1.43. So that's where you'll have, when you say the waterfall, I guess it'll be on the spectrum like you have in SDR console today. You can label the signals, and it will annotate them particularly for contests and crowded bands, so you can say, I know that signal is such and such, and
Okay, and then I've got one other question here. Somebody's asking if we can decode digital type signals, C4FM, D-Star, NXDN, P25, that kind of a thing. Do you have a native support for that or something planned, or is it still got to pipe out to something else?
You still got to use something like DSD Plus or some other third-party software for that decode. But that's something we're looking at ultimately. Could even if it will be probably a third-party software, but we could maybe tie in the decode so that you don't have to kind of worry about all this virtual audio cable. But there's a lot of growing expertise out there adjacent to where we sit in terms of software and decoding, and obviously there's standards evolving. And what we try to do is make it as easy as possible to interface to those other software. And often it's by doing videos that you can look up on if you go to the support tab on our website, there's a drop down menu and you go to the apps catalog, apps and support catalog, and there you get links to all these great YouTube videos. I think Rob, you've certainly contributed in the past.
I've got some basic ones. I know there's other people out there that have some of the more advanced stuff, so definitely check there.
Okay, good. Right, I'm very aware of the time. I'll try to sort of wrap it up quite quickly. There's a comparison chart of if you're wondering which RSP is best for your purposes. That's on our homepage. And I was just going to say that you can do so much with ham radio, but there's also this other stuff in the spectrum to play with outside regular ham bands. So it's a super way to stray off into those other areas of interest. So just a couple of things on the places to go for help. Obviously, there's the YouTube channel itself. There's our support searchable catalog that I just mentioned. This is Mike's Ham Guide channel, which, as I say, is more informal, and Mike really shapes this and puts a lot of effort into it. So that's Mike KD2KOG's channel. We have a Facebook news page. So this is just for news, which is just facebook.com/SDRplay. But very, very powerful, probably the most powerful community, which is over 13,000 members now, is the independent Facebook group that Paul Jones, Mike Preben, and more recently Rick King have put a lot of effort into maintaining. And there's also a forum that Rick runs for people who don't like Facebook. And also this year, Ruben has started this Groups.io forum, which is just gradually growing. I mean, people like different ways of getting help, and we can't guarantee that we're on top of all of these other ones, because we do try and prioritize support to people who come directly. And the one message I want to get across today is, if you come to us for support, and we'll support wherever you bought your RSP, and you'll get a response usually in hours. I mean, we really try to keep on top of these. But so often we respond, and it's just the nature of the internet. Unfortunately, there's so much junk out there that try as we will, our responses, even though they're humanly typed, we are not robots, still end up in spam folders. So, and as is always the case with support, we love screenshots. Send a screenshot, says 1,000 words. So, okay, well, I think that was all I was going to say. I just want to thank a big thank you to all the YouTubers, you, Rob, and all the other guys out there today, and girls, who have been doing all this YouTubing and come together on this special event. But without your help, I'm sure we wouldn't have so much fun. So thank you. So
I think we all kind of feel the same way, John. You guys make the products that we get to use and play with and enjoy, and make the hobby kind of what it is. So it's a symbiotic relationship, I think.
It does feel like that. It's a great family, really. Yeah.
There was only one more question here. Let's see if we can wrap it up quickly. I do want to cover the used stuff a little bit here, if we can, before we hand off the K8MRD. I'm just kind of getting everything warmed up for Mike here. I know everyone's looking forward to his stream today. But somebody was asking about the, and I lost the question now. It was something to do with the MFJ, what is it, the 1706 switch or something, whatever it is. Do you have any guides or tips on that?
So I think the best tips are, we have, if I just go to the website here, okay, so on the website, go to support, go to this app's support catalog, and I'm going to be a hostage to fortune here. I'm going to type in MFJ, it's probably enough. Okay, and you'll find here some guides as to how to use the MFJ. There's the 1708 SDR, which is specifically designed for SDRs, and there's a super video here that shows how it works and what it can do. There's also a document here which you can download, which explains exactly how it works. So I think that's the first port of call. If you have a specific question, then you can get in touch with us. Or most of the ham radio outlet people are becoming trained on understanding how these additional peripherals get used. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, yeah, and like John said, there's a wealth of resource on the webpage. There's Mike's YouTube channel, and just a lot of people out there sharing content for the SDRplay. They do a lot for our hobby, and I think it's a great resource. So, and again, thanks, John, for joining me on the stream today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to all of us about what you've got going on.
Well, thank you so much, Rob, for inviting me.
Okay, 7-3, John, and we'll look for you soon.
73.
Okay, so let me see if I can switch some things around here for everybody. Let's see. Okay, so I've put together just a little kind of I don't know if it's a definitive guide or anything. It's just sort of my thoughts on buying used gear at Hamfests. When I go to a Hamfest, whether it be something like Dayton, although I've never been to Dayton, but some of the bigger Hamfests, I like looking at the new gear. I like talking to the vendors and seeing what's out there, but I really like strolling through the swap meet part of it. I really like the old radios and looking for deals and things like that. So I thought it would be good to kind of just at least mention that today, since a lot of us are kind of in that boat when it comes to the Hamfests in that regard. So let me just click something else here. Whoops, I lost my screen. Okay, so like I said, we are looking at the used kind of end of it. Okay. A little technology glitch there. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to mention was, should you buy used or should you buy new? Used gear comes with a certain amount of risk. When choosing to buy something, it's important to know that the item may not function as intended or at all. It may be better to buy new gear if you need to rely on it, or you don't want to deal with fixing the item if it's broken or subpar. However, if you're willing to accept the risk, are able to repair your own gear, or are a collector of vintage radio equipment, then buying used is probably something that you want to look at. So some pros and cons that I thought of, and there may be more. Feel free to kind of discuss this in the chat. I can't see the chat right now the way I have the screens up, so I can't respond to that right now. But feel free to discuss. I'm sure there's plenty of opinions out there. Things to add to this list or maybe take away. So I like to always end on a positive note, so let's talk about the cons first. The first thing, obviously, is the unknown condition of the item you're looking at, whether it's a current model radio that's only 6 months old or whether it's something a lot older like the Drakes I have pictured here. You just don't know what kind of life that radio lived before you got that radio. So that's part of the risk in buying something used. Of course, older radios have arguably more outdated technology. So you're not going to get the latest and greatest bells and whistles most of the time when you're looking at an older radio. So if you're somebody that likes to stay on the cutting edge, then you may want to go for something new. Older radios, of course, some of them don't have the band coverage that the modern radios have. Depending on how old you go, they might not have the WARC bands like 17 meters, things like that in them. So keep that in mind if you're looking at a radio in particular and you want it to cover a certain band, a used option may not be what you want there. Longevity and reliability of used gear. Now, you can definitely find used gear that'll last a lifetime out there. But again, like I said in the beginning, you don't know kind of what that radio's life was like before you got a hold of it. So the thing may look perfect, but maybe it was abused, and maybe it's gonna quit in a few months or whatever after you buy it. So again, that's part of that risk right there. The next thing is repairability and parts availability. Now this could kind of go either way. In some cases, older gear is easier to repair because it tends to use more through-hole technology in the circuit boards or tubes, which are easy to pull out and replace, that kind of a thing. But older radios, you may not be able to get parts for them if something fails, especially if it's something unique to that radio, a microprocessor, or, even in some cases, tubes are not available anymore, that kind of a thing. So keep that in mind when you're looking at old stuff. And then there's compatibility with modern accessories. You might buy a radio that's just a couple of years old, but maybe it won't interface with the current auto tuner you have, or maybe your computer interface, things like that. So, that's another thing to research before you buy something used. And then the last thing is sort of along the same lines. Used gear oftentimes doesn't have an integrated computer interface, and that's where you got to go to West Mountain Radio or somebody like that, buy a Rig Blaster along with it. So if you're buying a used radio and you plan to do digital modes, you got to keep in mind that you may get a good deal on that used radio, but you're going to need to buy or build up other equipment to make that interface. So some pros. Again, let's talk about the good things about buying used stuff. So obviously, lower price most of the time. When you go to a Hamfest or look online, you got to be careful because there's people out there that are trying to sell, especially kind of just, very new used gear, so to speak, maybe 6-month-old type of thing. And sometimes they're asking more than what the new price might be. So keep that in mind. Don't make a bad deal kind of a thing. Always be cognizant of that. I know that sometimes I'll see something, and if I'm not sure of its value, if I'm at a Hamfest or whatever, I'll quickly get my phone out and try and figure out what I should pay for something like that. Let's see. Another good thing is that you're able to find discontinued items, especially accessories. Radio lines kind of come and go over the time, or accessories come and go, especially if it's not necessarily a popular accessory. Looking online or even at a Hamfest, this is where you're going to find something that you may want for your radio that just isn't available to buy anymore. The new stuff, you're going to get, a proven technology with a warranty kind of a thing, or the latest and greatest technology. When you buy used, I'm getting confused here. When you're buying used, the technology is proven. There isn't some new feature in there that's going to not work the way you expect or break or something like that. You know what you're getting with a used radio. And then there's support out there for it as well to kind of help you through whatever features and things that might be in that radio. Obviously, used is the only way to find vintage and classic equipment. You're not going to find a classic Drake like I'm showing here new. At least I don't think you're going to, but you never know. Somebody may have one hanging around that was never opened, but I guess that's still technically used. And then the older equipment, if you want to work on it or tinker with it or modify it in some way, you're going to be able to do that without worrying about voiding a warranty, or hopefully if you paid a lot less for it in the first place. If you do break it, well, it's not as big of a deal, and you can kind of, write that off to a learning experience kind of a thing. And then, of course, there's the nostalgia factor of buying used gear. I like old Kenwood radios, and, they're just a joy to use. They're not as technically able as the new ones. You don't have the waterfalls and all that kind of a thing, but I just enjoy using them and putting them on the air, and just the look and feel and just kind of the experience of using that kind of a radio is another thing that you can enjoy in the hobby. So where can we find used gear? Well, I always tell people that the best place to buy used gear, or well, maybe not the best place, but the lowest risk, is from club members. If you belong to a club, if somebody is selling something, that if you know that person, they're less likely to give you, a bum deal. They're not going to sell you something that doesn't work, or they're going to be upfront about it and tell you, yeah, this doesn't work. And a lot of times you can get a good deal from a club member, especially if you're a new ham just coming into the hobby and you're looking to set up your first station. If you can find a nice, open, welcoming club, there's usually somebody in there that has some excess gear that they'll, sell to you at a reasonable price. And like I said, you can kind of trust it, or at least if something goes wrong, the person is there to hopefully stand behind it. There's exceptions to that rule, but I like to think in the ham community we're all pretty open and honest about all of that stuff. So anyway, what's the next thing? I clicked something. I shouldn't have done that. Club auctions, kind of along the same lines. Sometimes your club will have an auction, and you can find stuff there. It's a little more anonymous sometimes. Somebody may lose track of it, or maybe it's from a silent key, or maybe it's some gear that your club had that they don't use anymore. But again, if it's all part of the club, people are usually going to be willing to work with you, or at least test the gear ahead of time before it's in the auction, because they know it might come back on them. Another good place is obviously a Hamfest, which, we all would be kind of looking at that used gear here if we could go to a Hamfest, and most of us can't right now. And, it's a good way to, look at something, talk to the owner, kind of assess what that owner is saying about that piece of equipment and whether you think it might be a good deal or a good value, or if it works or not. Another place is a yard sale or a garage sale. We call them tag sales here in Connecticut. I've had good luck just finding stuff at really good prices at a yard sale. Somebody may have inherited something, they don't know what it is, or they know what it is, but they just want it out of their garage or their cellar, and you can sometimes get a good price. You may not know the condition, especially if it's been stored for a while, but sometimes the value far outweighs the risk that you're taking in buying something that way. Another place is sort of a general flea market or a swap meet. We have a few of those here in Connecticut that I like to go to, especially in the summer. And sometimes there's people there selling radio gear. And again, it's not a radio-centric flea market, so sometimes the values are a little lower. They don't necessarily know the value of that item. So you can kind of get some good deals that way. And then, of course, there's the online sites, QTH, QRZ, ham stores, used pages, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, eBay. There's all these options. I tend to like to look at the places like QTH or QRZ because you're dealing with hams. I believe you have to have call signs to sell on those sites. And again, it kind of goes back to like dealing with a club member. If you're going to buy from a ham, chances are you're going to get an honest deal. Not always, but your chances are a lot better on a website like that than maybe Craigslist or eBay or something like that, where you just don't know what you're going to get, kind of a thing. Okay, so what to look for when looking at used gear in person. I always like to, especially if it's a radio or something like that, not so much like an accessory or some other item, but if it's a nice high-end radio that I'm seriously interested in, I always ask the seller if it's okay for me to handle it first. There's some guys that really value their equipment, that they don't really want you touching it. They want to sell it, but if they can't sell it at the Hamfest, they don't want you to break it either. It goes a long way to establishing that relationship with the seller to let them know that you're serious and you're not going to damage their equipment. So I always try to ask. I think it's good etiquette. Having been a seller myself, you just don't want somebody's greasy paws all over your stuff and then bring it home and find out it's now broken if you can't sell it. Anyway, so some of this stuff is obvious. I mean, guys probably know some of this stuff anyway, but it's worth repeating. Always look for scratches, cracks, worn lettering on the face. That might mean the radio was used a lot. Mismatched knobs, was the radio used for parts or something, or did a knob fall off, kind of a thing. And these aren't necessarily detriments. They're just all things that you can look at and try and ascertain a snapshot of the item and whether or not it's something that you want to purchase. And it gives you a little bit of negotiating power as well if some of these things are not quite what you'd expect. Another thing to look for is LCD display leakage. Some of the older equipment that has the monochrome LCDs, they'll leak over time. So you want to look for that black fringing around the edges. That might indicate that the radio may work okay, but the display, you may not be able to read it, kind of a thing. Another thing I like to look for is extra holes in the cases. We as hams, we like to tinker, we like to modify, and sometimes people will get in there and modify a radio, put some extra switches or some wires, an IF tap or something, and you want to know that going in if that radio had been modified. And the current owner may not always know, that kind of a thing either. So with the best intentions, they may be, selling you what they think is a pristine radio, but it's really not. Look for bent controls. That's the sign that the radio may have been dropped. Missing screws and head damage on the screws. That might tell you if somebody's been inside the radio tinkering with it. I've seen pristine radios with not a scratch on them. But if you look at the screw heads are stripped and worn, which tells you somebody was in there. And again, that's not necessarily a reason not to buy something, but it tells you that somebody was in the radio at one point. Missing feet, sticky controls or buttons. Did somebody spill something on it at some point, that kind of thing? Or was it in an environment that had maybe a lot of smoke damage or something and got in there and gummed everything up? Stuck dials and indicators, especially if you're looking at older equipment, analog equipment. It can be a real bear to restring a dial on an old radio. You may be able to do the electronics work, but just getting those dials rewound is sometimes an art, depending on the radio. So you want to keep an eye on that. You want to look for missing and damaged connectors, bent pins, things like that. That could indicate a number of things. Missing accessories, power cords, does the radio come with a microphone, that kind of a thing. And again, if you understand that the stuff isn't there ahead of time, you can kind of use that as a negotiating tactic as well. Again, if the owner lets you pick the radio up, shake it a little bit, not vigorously, but shake it a little bit and listen for those loose screws or broken bits of plastic to let you know that the radio was fooled with or dropped or something like that. Another thing I like to look for, I find it kind of humorous, is etched in call signs or other numbers on the case or in the back. That tells me that the radio was valued by its owner, at least at some point, and they were afraid that it was going to get stolen. But at the other end of that, you can also tell sometimes if a radio was put in a car. A lot of times people will etch in their call signs and numbers and things like that so that they can identify it if it's stolen out of their car. And again, we all know that a radio used mobile takes a little more abuse than one in the shack. So it can at least bring that question up as to whether or not the radio was mobile. But again, look for that sort of thing. I just find it kind of cool to see an old call sign on a radio. Another thing is ill-fitting covers, kind of like in the picture up here at the top. Did somebody take the cover off and put it on and just didn't bother to put it on right? That might give you an indication as to, if the radio was fixed, what was the the technician's skill level, kind of a thing. And then does the radio come with its original manual or box or paperwork, that kind of a thing? That can affect the price. The seller may be asking more because it has all of that stuff with it, and it's closer to being, a more pristine type of item. And you may be willing to pay more for it, especially if you're into the nostalgia factor and say you're a Kenwood collector and you want everything that radio would have come with when it was new in 1983 or whatever. So those are some things to keep an eye on. Let's see what to look for when buying used gear on the internet. And I know we're getting short on time, and I'll wrap it up after this. So ham radio swap sites or forums seem to be the most reliable. Like I said before, QRZ, QTH, whatever. Always try to use PayPal if you can. It costs a little more because of the transaction fees, but you get some insurance against, problems. And then if you can, contact the seller and ask for as many pictures as possible. Pay close attention to grammar of an ad. If it's not well written, the person may not really understand what they're selling, kind of a thing, and the deal may go bad. Watch for the not tested disclaimers. Again, somebody who says that may not know what they're getting into, or they may have a broken radio that they're trying to sell as new. If buying from a ham, always try to get their call sign. Like I said before, hams tend to take care of each other. Blurry or cropped photos may indicate hidden problems. And if you can, get some non-blurry photos and that kind of a thing. If possible, arrange an on-air test for an expensive radio. If you're looking at some high-end radio, try and set up a sked with the person and see if you can hear it for yourself, kind of a thing, especially if the person is able to operate on a band that you can too. Watch for hidden charges, packing and shipping, that kind of a thing. Don't underpay for the radio, but overpay for the shipping. And before you buy, determine the seller's return policy. If the thing is broken, then you want to know what you can do with it. So again, I think I had a couple more slides, but we ran a little long on time, so that's okay. But right now, I think what I'm going to do is hand everything off to Mike, K8MRD. I know you guys all know him, and you're ready to go over there and see what he's got to talk about. I know he's going to have Callum on his stream, so that's going to be a popular one. So make sure you start heading over there now. I'm going to see if I can bring him in. Let's see. Okay, so we should be getting Mike in here now. It looks like he's coming in. We have to wait a second. But again, thank you all for watching my channel and supporting my stream and all of the other ham radio YouTubers. Definitely appreciate all of the support from everybody and everybody that watches my channel on a regular basis. Thanks again. It was a lot of fun putting this together. We're going to do it again at some point. And, we wouldn't do it if you guys didn't support it and enjoy it. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Mike. How's it going, Mike? Are you all ready to get going here?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Good. Then everything is going well. I'm already streaming on my channel.
Okay.
So, we should be good to go.
Okay, so I've just made you the host. I've handed the baton to you, so you're ready to go. I'll drop off here and let you carry on, and I'll join you over on your stream.
Fantastic. Good stream, buddy. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And like I said, everybody head over to Mike's channel, and thanks for watching.